Okay. All right. So far we've got just a quick little recap, right? Chloroplast, mitochondria. We know that photosynthesis is taking place inside the chloroplast. What goes on inside the mitochondria?
Production of energy.
Energy production, otherwise known as cellular respiration. Yeah. Okay, we'll come back to the equations in a minute. Let's first talk about the inputs and the outputs of these, right? Or the reactants and the products. So, what form of energy do we start with? Sunlight. So plants take in sunlight. What else do they need in order to do photosynthesis? All right?
Sugar.
Okay. Well, okay. So you're close. Those are involved, but believe it or not, those two things are what plants make.
Glucose.
Right? So, which is the sugar. So, you guys just gave me their product.
Oh, so we're gonna write the product, not the word.
And yeah, I would prefer that. Well, it doesn't really matter.
I'll put next to it.
And oxygen. Somebody gave me an input. Megan, was that you? What'd you say?
Water.
Water. And what else do they require? What do plants take in?
Carbon dioxide.
Okay. Carbon dioxide. Okay, so we have our inputs. Photosynthesis occurs. Plants create oxygen and glucose. Then organisms can take that oxygen and glucose, perform cellular respiration, right? And it gives us CO2 and H2O again, but what's the form of energy that we get out of this? It's going to be ATP now, not sunlight, right? We can't put it back into sunlight. We get an ATP molecule. I want you guys to pause there for a second, okay? ATP, otherwise known as adenosine triphosphate. It is a nucleotide. Can you right now visualize what that nucleotide might look like? Tell me about it. What does it look like?
It has 3 phosphates going off the side, like 3 keys.
So I know there's 3 phosphates attached. What else does it have? 3 things to a nucleotide. We've got our phosphate. What else do we have to have?
Sugar.
A sugar. So there's either a deoxyribose or a ribose there. And then the last thing I have on it is going to be a nitrogen base, right?
Yeah.
Look over here, right? Here's my basic structure. So you should be able to think of that ATP and say, oh, I know what that molecule looks like. And in this case, the base is adenosine. That's why it's called adenosine triphosphate. Okay, we've got the A for the base. All right, so that's just a tie into our last unit, right? That we're talking about. A nucleotide here is a major energy molecule for the cells. All right, so let's use our inputs and our outputs to build the equation. Now, when you're writing down the chemical equation, make sure you leave yourself a little room because I'm going to ask you to balance it. Throw back to last year as well. Okay, so our inputs our reactants are going to be carbon dioxide and water. And then in the presence of sunlight, we're going to get glucose and oxygen. All right, so now based on our laws of conservation of matter, matter cannot be created or destroyed, it can only change form. Whatever I have on one side, I have to have on the other.
This is what I filled on last
So
time.
how do we balance this equation out? Start with the carbon atoms, right? You're going to go through each atom one at a time. So how do we balance out carbon?
Oh, shoot. You had to put 6 in front of the...
Right? Because I've got 6 carbon over here, only 1. So if I put a 6 out here, it's going to give me the 6 carbon that I need. I'm going to help you guys along a little bit. Move to the H's next. Benita? It gets tricky if you try to go to the O's. A 10?
No, I'm just kidding.
What is it? 6. I'm going to put a 6 where?
Oh,
Front of the H?
I thought you multiplied. I forgot.
Okay.
That was a different.
Because if I have 12 over here, this now gives me the 12.
This is so.
Okay? Now let's take a look at the oxygen. How many oxygen do we have on this side altogether? 12 plus another 6, 18 oxygen on this side. So right now, how many do I have over here? I've got these two, and then the 6, so I only have 8. But now think about it. Do I really want to put something in front of this? Not really, because then it's going to change my C and my H's, which are already balanced, right? So in this molecule, I already have 6, which means I need to get at least another 12 out of this. So what are we going to put in front over here? A 6. And we've balanced it. Okay, and basically what this is showing you is that in order to make one glucose molecule, I'm going to need 6 carbon dioxide and 6 water molecules to do it. But remember, this is called what? A carbohydrate, right? Because it's literally going to be carbon. You can reduce that formula to CH2O. Literally a carbohydrate, right? All right, so if I know the equation for one, it's pretty easy to figure out the equation for the other because it's really just the opposite. The products over here become the reactants of the next one, right? And the products here become the reactants for that one. So now that you know it, you can just fill it in. I'm going to write it off to the side because I don't have a whole lot of room. Plus 6O2. And the only difference is the energy that we end up with, right? Instead of getting sunlight, I'm going to say I end up with ATP and actually get ATP and heat. One last thing I just want to point out, what type of organisms do photosynthesis? Not a trick question. Easy question, right? What type of organisms do photosynthesis, right? Plants, okay? So we got plants that do this. There's other organisms too, like cyanobacteria or phytoplankton that can do it. They're also called autotrophs.
I swear we learned about that freshman year.
Yes, you should have. Autotrophs literally means self-feeding. They make their own food, they make the glucose, and then they use it for cellular respiration. What organisms do cellular respiration? Animals do it. Anything else? Did you say something, Panita?
I said us, but I don't think it's
Oh, well, we're animals, right? So us.
Yeah.
Do plants do cellular respiration?
Yeah.
They do, right? That's why they're considered autotrophs. They make their food, but then they make it so that they can use it during cellular respiration and get ATP to do other things. So literally, if you're a living thing, you have to be able to, one of the characteristics of life is being able to obtain and use energy. So all living things have to be able to do cellular respiration in order to be alive. I just want to refresh your memories on that. Everything does some form of cellular respiration. Okay. Now let's take a closer look at the structure of these organelles. All right, so without me giving you every little thing on here, could you use common sense and process of elimination to figure out some of the labels on here?
Yeah, so number 1's outer number.
Good, and you can either label on the diagram or use the list at the bottom. I prefer to label on the diagram, but it's up to you. Can somebody give me another one?
Number 2 is inner.
An inner membrane. There's one other one on here that should be pretty straightforward.
The intermembrane space
Is which one?
number
4. All right, the other three, not so intuitive, right? So I'll just give those to you. These individual disc-like flattened disc things are called thylakoids.
Is that number 6?
Yes. Number 6. When you stack those individual thylakoids together, it becomes the grana, or granum, granum, one's plural, one's singular, I forget which one's which. And then the last one, the sort of the fluid inside is going to be called the stroma. Again, very unique shape, right? Very unique structure to this. Let's do the same thing with the mitochondria. Start with our more obvious common sense structures. So somebody want to give me any of the... 2 is going to be inner membrane, but it's not really pointing to a membrane, it's pointing to like a space.
So the intermembrane space?
Yeah, because that's going to be, number 2 is going to be intermembrane. Anything else? Josh, give me one. You got the word bank, right? What's number 3 going to be? That's an easy one. Outer membrane. Anita.
Would number 1 be inner? Or
Yeah, because it's kind of a toss-up between these 2, right?
yeah.
This one's going to be the black edge is going to be the inner membrane. For number 4, they're pointing to a feature of that inner membrane, which is this folding. Okay? So again, very unique feature. That's going to be called the cristae. And I tend to think of the S in the cristae to representing those squiggles, right? The folding that's happening. And so now that leaves us with number 5 being the matrix. Okay? All right. Moving right along. The last thing that you guys have okay, so here's another look at these 2 organelles. Again, to tie into some other concepts and other lessons, can somebody tell me why DNA is found inside the mitochondria? Or why does the mitochondria have its own DNA? Do you remember this from last week's lesson? Why am I finding DNA inside of an organelle? Think of prokaryotes and eukaryotes.
No.
What happened? The mitochondria, if it has its own DNA, at one time the mitochondria was once its own organism, right? And through a process called endosymbiosis, right? 2 things kind of, one engulfed the other, 2 things came into close contact and it sort of sucked it in, right? So that's one of the reasons why it's got its own DNA. Another sort of feature on here, remember both of these have a double membrane, right? And that is sort of the result of that infolding of one to bring in the other, right? So as one sort of takes it in, it takes its own membrane and surrounds it to pull it in. And so you get that double membrane feature because of that, okay? All right. So remind me, what happens inside these 2 organelles? What's going on inside mitochondria?
It needs energy.
Cellular respiration. What's going on inside the
Photosynthesis.
the chloroplast is photosynthesis, right? So I've got chemical reactions taking place. And actually, more specifically, those chemical reactions are actually taking place across the membrane. All right? So on this membrane itself is where my reactions are taking place. Same thing with the thylakoid. I've got the reaction taking place, notice, right, through each one of those things. Okay. And in this statement right here, they're referring to an endoplasmic reticulum, and what happens there is the production of proteins, okay? So I just want to read this statement. Organelles, such as the mitochondria and the endoplasmic reticulum, where proteins are made, they have membranes that compartmentalize reactions and other metabolic processes. Photosynthesis, right? So to function properly, organelles must move substances across their membranes. More specifically, like I said, those reactions are sort of taking place right on those membranes. Now, let's look at this term compartmentalized reactions. And the other thing I want you to think about is when we started this unit on day one, I gave you like a little intro with a video called The Inner Life of the Cell. And I said, okay, now go do an ed puzzle on the organelles, right? But in the chat room, I had you guys respond to that video that you saw, The Inner Life of the Cell. And so a lot of people noticed what? What was going on inside the cell?
A lot moving.
A lot was going on. Tons of activity going on inside our little cells, okay? It's hard to imagine that there's so much activity going on inside there. So I want you to think about that video and think of this term, compartmentalized reactions. What do you think that means, and why would that be beneficial to a cell that has a lot of stuff going on inside of it? Right?
It's like how the organelles and everything are in their specific compartments, and it's beneficial to the cell because by everything being close together, it makes for easy transport.
So it's basically making things organized, as you're pointing out, right? You said the compartments themselves are the organelles. So what it's doing is, with all of this stuff that's going on, it's saying, okay, here's my spot for this one reaction to happen, right? This one type of reaction to happen. It's not going on and all over the cell. It's got a specific place to do it. So we're sort of organizing the chaos a little bit inside of cells by containing or giving a specific location for those reactions to occur. Does that make sense? Right? You're compartmentalizing the reaction, you're containing it into a specific organelle. Okay? So we have compartmentalizing reactions, things like photosynthesis taking place in the chloroplast, cellular respiration occurring in the mitochondria, protein production, and the endoplasmic reticulum. All right, so we have this idea of compartmentalizing the reactions. Let's take it one step further and look at their structure. So it says down here, explain how the folding of the mitochondrial inner membrane, which is the cristae, right? Explain how that and the many individual thylakoids are beneficial to a cell that is carrying out chemical reactions. So the question is really asking you, why is it beneficial to have all of these folds as opposed to just one long membrane like this? And why would it be beneficial to have a bunch of these things stacked instead of just one? Think about that. So, what do you think, Marie?
The cristae folded allows for more room, and the more room you have, the more you can get done. And then for, what was that one?
It's the thylakoids.
Oh,
We've got, instead of just one, I've got like a stack of them,
They
and then
help
many of those stacks.
capture the light for photosynthesis.
Yeah, so if the light is being captured by there, that helps with photosynthesis. The more I have, the more surface area I have, the more those reactions can take place, right? So by increasing my surface area with these folds and increasing the surface area with the many stacks, right? So here we're increasing surface area for the reactions to take place. Both of these concepts are ultimately allowing for the cell to become more efficient. right? And organized. All right, does that make sense? Compartmentalization, we're containing it, and I'm giving lots of surface area through these stacks and those folds so that a lot more of those reactions can take place, and it ultimately ends up making a much more efficient cell. Okay? And so basically what you are seeing here is, again, that concept of structure and function. We saw a little bit with proteins as well. Proteins have a specific shape that allows them to do their function. The structure of these membranes allows them to do, or the structure of the organelles and their membranes allows them to do their function and do it well, do it efficiently. All right? So with that, once, I saw a lot of you guys jotting down notes, but I'm gonna ask that you respond to me. I have a Google form that I posted on the Google Classroom. I posted it there yesterday, but now you can go in and just answer the 2 questions that I have there that basically wraps up what we just talked about, okay?
I thought that was yesterday's work.
So you did it? Yeah, well, so if you did it already and you think maybe you did it okay, then that's good, but you can go in and do a second one if you want to tweak it. You can, or if you think you're all set, you're good to go. That's fine too.
Is it in my AP?